I'm someone who grew up in a multi-platform house, but during the 16-bit console wars, we had the Sega Genesis. I can't ever remember seeing or hearing about Beyond Oasis during that time. I only learned about it in the last decade thanks to videos here on YouTube. So to everyone who's taken the time to make a video about Beyond Oasis, I salute you. Had I played Beyond Oasis as a wee lad in the 90s, I would not have gotten very far. I didn't have the attention span for games that didn't guide me by the hand. So beat-em-ups, platformers, and arcade racers are mostly what held my attention. These past few years I've been making an effort to play games outside my comfort zone. Lo and behold, Beyond Oasis turned out to be the perfect game for someone like me who's familiar with the action side of things and wants a taste of adventure. So let's kick off this list of my favorite things about it with the combat. When talking about Beyond Oasis, there's a quick and easy comparison that's often repeated. Same blueprint as several Super NES classics such as Secret of Mana and even A Link to the Past. Beyond Oasis is a Zelda-type RPG. Breath of the Wild for the Sega Genesis. Best action RPG of all time, barring Zelda. Fast-paced alternative to The Legend of Zelda. Zelda-like. A Zelda wannabe. Zelda-shaped hole in
Zelda.
Hearing this painted my expectations of the game, so imagine my surprise when I discover in its chest beats the heart of a 2D brawler. It turns out that Beyond Oasis and Streets of Rage 2 share at least a few names amongst their developer credits. For better, and sometimes a little worse, they implemented a method for laying the beat down on monsters that was fun from start to finish. The sound effects for Prince Ali slashing and pummeling the monsters was particularly satisfying, as are their death screams. The fighting moves themselves are satisfying to execute, except for the crouch poke. I would have preferred a leg sweep or anything besides. Charging in a battle and uppercutting with the dagger never got old. Neither did jump kicking those annoying flying enemies right in their stupid elevated faces. Oh, did you get yourself surrounded? Put them on their asses with a 360 spin attack. Blow them up with your bombs. Hell, blow them up with their own bombs. Or just backflip through the air like a goddamn maniac. My next favorite part of Beyond Oasis is also something I'd like to highlight as setting it apart from its Super Nintendo contemporary, the elemental spirits. They are found at the end of certain dungeons and are used in combat, exploration, and puzzle solving. When you want to use one of your spirits, you can't just equip them like any old piece of gear. You have to shoot your armlet at the element they represent. The first spirit in your quest, Dido, can be summoned from water, so this of course means ponds, rivers, or a flooded room. But it can also be water seeping through the cracks in a wall, a slow drip from the ceiling. Even these puddle enemies work for summoning Dido. Hey, Future Rob here. I was filming some B-roll and looking for that spot where the water is seeping through the wall, and I think I found one even cooler. There's this one spot in the game where it's raining, and yes, you can summon Dido from the rainstorm. I'm sorry, I just can't get over how fucking cool this is. Ifrit, the fire spirit, can be summoned from campfires and torches, but also the explosion of your own bombs, which is just frickin' rad. Shade, the void spirit, can be spawned from any reflective surface. That includes giant icicles, onyx pillars, your now ex-girlfriend's rearview mirror as she drives away with the dog you both adopted, or, my personal favorite, use the reflection of a monster's shiny armor. A bit disappointing, the final spirit, Bo, can only be summoned from specific plants. It would have been cool to summon him from maybe moss growing on a wall or something. With how creative the summoning of every other spirit is, I think we can let it slide that Bo was a bit disappointing. But that's alright, let's move on to my next favorite thing about Beyond Oasis. Each of the spirits have their uses with regards to exploration and puzzle solving. Dido to extinguish fire, Ifrit to melt ice, etc. They're also pretty handy in a fight. On command, Dido can heal you or transform into a water spout to give you breathing room. She whirls around at random, so I mostly used her to heal. Ifrit is a jacked flame that burns with the fuel of protein shakes and pro wrestling. He can be left to his own devices to knock over even the largest monsters that get too close. Should an enemy be out of his reach, he can be commanded to flame on and barrel into them. His crowd control move is to explode like a Karen in a coffee shop. This was my go-to spirit for most of the game, and to be honest, he killed several bosses for me. Beyond Oasis waits maybe halfway into your adventure before it introduces platforming, and it does so with both moving platforms and teleporting wizards trying to knock you off. And right as the dread sets in that you'll have to be platforming for the rest of the game from this less than ideal perspective, you unlock a new spirit who eases that dread. Shade is your mirror double, hence the summoning from reflective surfaces. It has several abilities such as being your hookshot, letting you astral project to hit switches, and revealing hidden teleport locations. But the most helpful thing about Shade for both combat and exploration is its ability to tank damage for you. So if you find yourself struggling with platforming or with fighting, summoning Shade is like having armor or a second health bar. Which leaves us with Bow. I really wish Bow was easier to summon because I prefer to use it when fighting groups. Ifrit tends to wander and can wind up hitting you in the heat of battle, whereas Bow stays where you summon it, making it easier to kite large groups into its jaws. Overall, when I found myself getting upset at the game, it's because I wasn't using my spirits effectively. I feel they deserve a spot on some YouTubers' top 10 most useful companions. I'm not even going to talk for this next part. Here is footage of my 3 favorite boss fights. All the bosses are enormous like the ones I just showcased. Like the bosses from other 2D brawlers, the ones here can be just as cheap and hard to predict, which leads us to my next favorite thing about Beyond Oasis. Back in my childhood, it wasn't uncommon for cheap, quarter-munching arcade designs to leak into home console games. With Beyond Oasis being a brawler, it's no exception. I'm personally oversensitive to things I consider to be unfair or beginner traps, so at times I needed to put the controller down and go cool off. My next favorite part of Beyond Oasis is more subtle than the rest and involves multiple aspects of the game's design working together. It's also more subjective, as I'm making an assumption behind the designer's intent. But it's a safe assumption to make, I think. That being, how throughout the game players are rewarded with tools that, I feel, encourage the player to keep going and finish the game. On the side of the scale with annoying shit that makes me want to rage quit, we have getting stun locked by monsters, being surrounded and overwhelmed by enemies, taking unavoidable damage from cheap monster spawns, platforming from this awkward perspective, being attacked as soon as a screen loads. I mean, there are more examples, but I think that's the worst of it. And then on the more positive side of the scale, we have an overabundance of recovery and weapon items to such a degree that I almost always had a full inventory. You'll actually be making the game harder for yourself if you try to save items for boss fights. Monsters and treasure chests respawn when you leave and re-enter a dungeon. On the one hand, it sucks to have an entire dungeon reset just because you stepped outside to save the game, but it's great if you want to grind for health items or reacquire powerful weapons like this sword named Death. Both Ali and the spirits can level up. There are colored gems, which increase the power of your spirits, and hearts, which increase Ali's max health. The spirit gems are hidden throughout the game, but the hearts are dropped after killing a certain number of enemies. In my playthrough, I collected 33 hearts and killed 681 monsters, which means it's fewer than 20 enemies per heart drop. Dido can heal you, and Shade can tank damage. Essentially, both of these companions let you use your spirit power as a second health bar. From the start of the game, your spirit power recharges outside of dungeons. Not much later, you're given an item that does the same for your health. And near the end, you're upgraded to be able to recharge spirit power anywhere, even in dungeons. Again, this steady escalation of offering more ways for the player to recover comes across, to me, as a means of encouraging players to finish the game. You should know, I'm a very casual player who doesn't finish most of the games I play, and I always appreciate when a designer doesn't throw a wall in my face that says, "Get good." One final note on this topic, I'm excluding the infinite weapons from this as they're incredibly well hidden and are acquired by completing the hardest challenges in the game. To me, these aren't really meant to encourage new players to finish the game, but rather reward veterans who have mastered it and are looking for its hardest challenges. Check this out. The villain of the game wants to be called Silver Armlet. That's like if I went around introducing myself as Captain America Pajamas. That's going to do it for this review of Beyond Oasis, which I guess turned into a list video. I understand much better now why list videos are so popular. I played Beyond Oasis via the Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection on the Xbox 360. This was ideal for me because I got to use save states and cut down on repetition, and because a loose cart is $40. I will be keeping an eye out for it at retro game stores and conventions, if we can ever get past this pandemic. Beyond Oasis has become a favorite Genesis game of mine, easy top 10. It's also part of the newest Genesis collection for the PlayStation and Xbox systems, so if you've not played it, there's plenty of ways to do so. Real quick, if any of you discovers time travel, please go back to the 90s and make a Beyond Oasis movie starring Jonathan Taylor Thomas. He even holds shit above his head, just like in Zelda.